The first transmission came on a Tuesday. Not that anyone remembers Tuesdays anymore, not after what happened. Captain Diane Reyes stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, her hands clasped behind her back, watching the holographic display flicker with an incoming signal that would change everything humanity had ever understood about its place in the universe. The ship's communication array hummed with an intensity that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. 23 years of deep space exploration had taught her to trust those instincts. The preliminary data burst was unlike anything in human communication archives. Mathematically precise yet fundamentally alien, the signal carried a complexity that suggested intelligence far beyond anything Earth scientists had ever hypothesized. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It was a message, deliberate, calculated, and waiting. Commander Alex Lindbergh, the Horizon's chief science officer, leaned forward. His fingers danced across the holographic interface, parsing through layers of data that seemed to shift and breathe like living information. "Captain," he said, his voice a mixture of excitement and barely contained fear, "this isn't just communication. This is an introduction." Reyes knew what that meant. First contact wasn't a theoretical exercise anymore. It was happening, right here, right now, millions of light years from the home planet they'd left behind. Humanity's most ambitious deep space mission was about to become something far more significant than a scientific expedition. The ship's crew, a carefully selected group of scientists, engineers, and military personnel, watched in collective silence. Each of them understood the weight of this moment. Decades of preparation, countless simulations, and years of training had led to this singular instant. Whatever emerged from this communication would redefine humanity's understanding of existence itself. Ancient civilizations had always been a topic of academic speculation. Archaeologists and xenobiologists had long theorized about potential advanced species that might have existed before humanity's technological awakening. But theories were one thing. Concrete evidence was another. This signal suggested something more profound. It wasn't just evidence of past intelligent life. It was a deliberate outreach, a message that had traversed unimaginable distances, preserved with a precision that defied current human technological comprehension. "Decryption protocols are active," Lindbergh reported, his voice tight. "But this isn't encryption as we understand it. It's adaptive. The more we analyze, the more complex the underlying structure becomes." Reyes watched the holographic display. Geometric patterns emerged, dissolved, and reformed. A living mathematical language that seemed to pulse with something almost resembling consciousness. Her military training screamed caution, but the explorer in her heart raced with an uncontrollable curiosity. They were witnessing something unprecedented. Not just first contact, but a potential bridge between humanity and a civilization so advanced, so ancient, that their very existence would challenge everything humans believed about intelligence, evolution, and their place in the cosmic hierarchy. The signal continued to pulse. Wait, was that a pattern? A response? Or something else entirely? Suddenly, the holographic display fractured. Not with an error, but with an intentional, almost surgical precision. Something was looking back at them. Something was preparing to speak. The silence that followed was more deafening than any explosion. Captain Reyes felt the weight of 1,000 unasked questions pressing against the ship's hull. Commander Lindbergh's hands had frozen mid-motion, his usual analytical demeanor replaced by something closer to raw wonder. "Tactical systems," Reyes barked, her voice cutting through the tension. "Full defensive posture. But do not, I repeat, do not initiate any aggressive response." Lieutenant Sarah Chen, head of communications, worked frantically at her station. Her fingers flew across holographic interfaces, capturing every millisecond of the strange transmission. "Captain," she called out, "the signal structure is changing. It's not just adapting. It's responding to our observation." The Horizon's crew had been selected for this mission from thousands of candidates. Each was a specialist, chosen not just for technical expertise, but for psychological resilience. Deep space exploration demanded more than scientific knowledge. It required the ability to confront the unknown without breaking. Rise knew their mission's true purpose better than anyone. The United Earth Space Initiative wasn't just about exploration. It was about survival. Earth had become a pressure cooker of environmental challenges, resource depletion, and geopolitical tensions. These deep space missions represented humanity's best hope, a potential escape route, a chance to find new habitable worlds. The ship's historical logs told a stark story. 12 previous missions had vanished without a trace. The Horizon was humanity's 13th attempt, a number that would have terrified superstitious crews of previous generations. But this crew was different. They were pragmatists, scientists, survivors. Pattern recognition is off the charts, Lindbergh muttered, more to himself than anyone else. These geometric transformations, they're not random. They're communicative, but not like any language we've ever encountered. The holographic display continued its mesmerizing dance. Shapes emerged and dissolved, mathematical structures that seemed to breathe with an alien intelligence. It was as if something was trying to communicate, but was fundamentally unable or unwilling to use any framework humans could easily comprehend. Lieutenant Chen's voice broke through again. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple layered frequencies. It's like multiple messages happening simultaneously. Our systems can only parse a fraction of what's being transmitted." Rice studied the crew. Each member was a study in controlled tension. Years of training had prepared them for first contact scenarios, but theoretical preparation was always different from reality. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the mission's lead xenobiologist, leaned forward with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Her entire career had been dedicated to the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence. "It's deliberate," Rodriguez whispered. "Whatever this is, it knows we're here. It's testing us." The ship's quantum computers worked overtime, attempting to decode the transmission. But with each layer they penetrated, the message became more complex, more intricate. It was like watching a living mathematical organism that shifted and evolved in real time. Lindbergh's console suddenly flickered. A series of coordinates appeared, stellar mapping references that seemed to point to a specific location in deep space, far beyond their current position, far beyond any human exploration zone. "Are they inviting us?" Rise asked, more to herself than to anyone else. No one answered. The implications were too massive, too overwhelming to verbalize. The transmission continued, pulsing, waiting, watching. Something was out there, something ancient, something that had been waiting, perhaps for centuries, perhaps for millennia, to make contact. And the Horizon was about to find out why. 36 hours after the initial transmission, the Horizon's crew had barely slept. The ship's atmosphere crackled with an electric tension that no environmental control system could regulate. Captain Rice had implemented strict rotation schedules, but nobody was truly resting. The mysterious coordinates continued to pulse, a silent beacon that seemed to both beckon and warn. Dr. Rodriguez had been working nonstop, her wall of holographic displays covered in complex mathematical models that tried, and failed, to make sense of the alien communication. "It's not just a message," Rodriguez muttered during her third consecutive hour of analysis. "It's a test, maybe even a challenge." Commander Lindbergh had discovered something that made everyone's blood run cold. The transmission's underlying mathematical structure contained embedded references, fragments that seemed to reference human technological developments. Not just current technology, but potential future innovations. Technologies that hadn't even been conceived yet. "How is this possible?" Lieutenant Chen asked, her voice a mixture of scientific curiosity and genuine fear. "It's like someone, or something, has been watching us, studying us." The ship's quantum computer had begun to display increasingly bizarre outputs. Fragmented images would flash momentarily across screens, glimpses of landscapes that looked both alien and eerily familiar. geometric structures that seemed to defy known physical laws, fleeting representations of something just beyond human comprehension. Rays understood the psychological strain. First contact scenarios were part of their training, but no simulation could prepare them for this level of uncertainty. The crew was holding together, but she could see the cracks forming. Dr. Rodriguez's hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching. Lineberg had stopped eating, subsisting on nutrient supplements and pure adrenaline. The ship's external sensors began picking up subtle gravitational anomalies. Nothing massive, but consistent, rhythmic, like something was approaching or surrounding them. "We're being measured," Lineberg said during a briefing, his typical scientific detachment replaced by something closer to reverence. Not just observed, measured, evaluated. Their communication logs showed something even more disturbing. The transmission was now subtly incorporating elements of human communication patterns, not just mimicking them, but evolving alongside their attempts to understand it. It was learning, adapting in real time. 24 hours earlier, the transmission had been incomprehensible. Now, fleeting patterns suggested something terrifyingly close to communication. Not words, not language, but something deeper, a fundamental exchange of information that transcended traditional communication. Rodriguez's latest analysis suggested a terrifying possibility. "This isn't just first contact," she told Reyes privately. "This is an assessment. We're being evaluated against some kind of cosmic standard we don't understand." The ship's trajectory had subtly changed, not by crew intervention, but by some external gravitational influence they couldn't fully explain. They were being guided, redirected, towards what nobody knew. The quantum computers began displaying a sequence, a countdown, a measurement, a warning. No one could be certain. And then, just as the tension reached its absolute breaking point, something began to materialize just outside the ship's primary observation window. Something that defied every known law of physics. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about existence itself. The horizon held its collective breath. The thing outside wasn't a ship. It wasn't a structure. It wasn't anything the human mind could easily categorize or comprehend. It was possibility made manifest. Geometric shapes twisted and folded through dimensions that shouldn't exist, creating a visual language that threatened to shatter the very concept of perception. Captain Rice felt something deep in her consciousness, a pressure that wasn't physical, but something far more invasive. "Shut down all external systems," she commanded, her voice cutting through the bridge's stunned silence. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew it was futile. Whatever was happening transcended mechanical controls. Dr. Rodriguez's instruments began to malfunction, not in the way electronics typically fail, with sparks or complete shutdown. These systems were transforming. Holographic displays morphed, mathematical equations rewriting themselves in real time. The ship's quantum computers were no longer processing information. They were communicating. "It's interfacing," Lineberg whispered, his scientific detachment crumbling. "Not with our technology. With us." A sudden burst of data flooded the ship's systems. Not an attack. Not a transmission. Something more like a download, but of what nobody could comprehend. Fragments of memory began bleeding across the ship's displays. Moments from Earth's history, glimpses of human achievement, scenes of both triumph and devastating failure. Lieutenant Chen's console flickered with impossible images. The first human landing on Mars. The restoration of Earth's dying ecosystems. Conflicts long forgotten. Technological breakthroughs that hadn't happened yet. "We're being judged," Rodriguez muttered, her hands shaking. "Not by technology. Not by military might. By something deeper." The strange manifestation outside began to pulse. Each pulse sent waves of information that seemed to penetrate the ship's hull, reaching directly into the crew's minds. Collective memories. Collective potential. The very essence of human experience. Reyes realized something terrifying. This wasn't first contact. This was something far more profound. A selection process. Humanity had always wondered if we were alone in the universe, if other civilizations existed, what they might be like. But those questions assumed a simple binary, that alien life would be similar to human life, comparable, understandable. This was different. The manifestation outside began to fragment, not dissolve. Fragment. As if multiple versions of the same entity were simultaneously existing and separating. Each fragment carried a different potential outcome, different paths, different futures. "It's showing us something," Lindbergh said, his voice barely a whisper. "Our potential futures, our possible evolutions." The ship's internal systems began to respond to thoughts before they were fully formed. Displays shifted based on emotional responses. Technologies that should have been impossible began to materialize, not through mechanical means, but through some fusion of thought and potential. Reyes gripped her command chair. Whatever was happening transcended everything humanity had ever understood about existence, consciousness, technological development. And they were about to find out why they had been chosen, or if they would survive the choosing. Time stopped, or perhaps it never existed at all. Captain Rice felt herself fragmenting, not physically, but across layers of consciousness she never knew existed. Memories that were her own filtered through her mind. Generations of human struggle. Moments of profound discovery, collective hopes and devastating failures. The manifestation outside the ship was no longer something external. It had become part of them. "We are being evaluated," Dr. Rodriguez's voice echoed, though her lips hadn't moved. Not as individuals, as a species. Lindbergh's scientific mind was racing. He understood now that this wasn't an alien encounter in any traditional sense. This was an assessment, a cosmic filter that had been watching humanity's developmental trajectory for millennia. Fragments of potential futures cascaded through the ship's systems. Humanity expanding across the galaxy. Humanity destroying itself. Humanity evolving beyond recognition. Parallel potentials, each as real and unreal as the next. The crew experienced everything simultaneously. Their individual consciousnesses merged and separated, like waves breaking and reforming. They saw humanity's entire history, not as a linear progression, but as a complex web of choices, potential, and consequence. Captain Reyes realized the true nature of the encounter. This wasn't about first contact. This was about potential. Humanity's potential to either transcend its current limitations or collapse under its own fundamental contradictions. A voice, if it could be called a voice, resonated through their collective consciousness. Not in words, but in pure conceptual understanding. Humanity stood at a crossroads, not just as a civilization, but as a fundamental expression of cosmic potential. The manifestation began to collapse, not in destruction, but in fundamental reorganization. The ship's systems reconstructed themselves. Technological understanding that had been beyond human comprehension began to crystallize into something comprehensible. Dr. Rodriguez was the first to understand. "We're being given a choice," she said, her voice trembling. "Not just to survive, but to evolve." The final moments of the encounter approached. The crew understood they were experiencing something no human had ever witnessed, a fundamental evaluation of their species' cosmic potential. And then, in the final millisecond, everything changed. The manifestation, this complex entity that had been studying humanity, revealed its true nature. It wasn't an alien civilization. It wasn't a technological construct. It was a mirror, a reflection of humanity's own potential, projected across dimensions of possibility. Everything they had experienced was a test, not imposed from outside, but generated from within their own collective unconscious. The ship's systems stabilized. The strange geometric forms outside dissolved, but something fundamental had changed. Commander Lindbergh looked at Captain Reyes. A silent understanding passed between them. They had been shown something profound, something that would change everything. Humanity was not alone in the universe. Humanity was the universe, experiencing itself, and their journey was just beginning. 6 months after the encounter, The Horizon returned to Earth. But it wasn't the same ship. The crew wasn't the same crew. United Earth Space Initiative headquarters buzzed with a nervous anticipation that bordered on controlled chaos. Hundreds of scientists, military personnel, and government officials waited for the debrief that would change everything humanity understood about its place in the universe. Captain Rice stood before the inquiry board, her eyes holding a depth that went beyond typical military discipline. The technological advancements they'd brought back defied current scientific understanding. Quantum computing systems that could predict complex global patterns, medical technologies that could regenerate damaged cellular structures, energy systems that drew power from dimensional interfaces humanity had never imagined. But the real transformation wasn't technological. It was psychological. "We are not who we thought we were." Rise began her report, her voice steady. The encounter wasn't about external discovery. It was about internal potential. Dr. Rodriguez sat beside her, her research notes containing revelations that would take decades to fully comprehend. The cosmic mirror they'd experienced had shown them humanity's interconnectedness, not just as a species, but as a fundamental expression of universal consciousness. Commander Lindbergh had been working tirelessly to translate the mathematical language they'd encountered. It wasn't a traditional communication system. It was a living framework of potential, a way of understanding reality that transcended linear thought. Lieutenant Chen had discovered something even more profound. The transmission they'd received wasn't a single event. It was happening constantly. Humanity had just finally developed the capacity to perceive it. The inquiry board listened in stunned silence. These weren't the ravings of explorers who had gone mad in deep space. These were carefully documented observations that challenged everything humans believed about consciousness, technology, and existence. "We're not at the beginning of something," Rice continued. "We're in the middle of a process we're just beginning to understand." The Horizon's return marked more than a successful mission. It represented a fundamental shift in human perspective. The ship itself had become something more than a technological construct. Its systems now responded to thought patterns, integrated with the crew's collective consciousness in ways that blurred the line between technology and living intelligence. Outside the conference room, the world continued. Cities hummed with their usual energy. People went about their daily lives, unaware that everything was about to change. But change was coming. The cosmic mirror they'd encountered wasn't a one-time event. It was an ongoing process, a continuous evaluation of humanity's potential. And now, they were active participants rather than passive subjects. Dr. Rodriguez's final report contained a single line that would become legendary in scientific circles. "We are not discovering the universe. The universe is discovering itself through us." As the debriefing concluded, Captain Rice looked out the window. The sky seemed different now, not physically altered, but perceived differently. Each cloud, each patch of blue, now held the potential of infinite possibility. The Horizon's mission was over, but humanity's real journey was just beginning. And somewhere, in the vast complexity of existence, something was watching, waiting, evaluating.